Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're tackling one of the absolute biggest, yet surprisingly silent margin killers in offshore project execution. We're going to focus on exactly how to defend your contract commercially from what we call creeping scope.
Okay, let's dive into this. $8 million. Just imagine executing a massive offshore EPCI contract where that exact amount of scope just kind of drifts across your contractual boundary. And you know what the crazy part is? Not a single one of those items was actually worth arguing about. It was just a clarification here, a tiny little addition there, a favor to keep the client relationship warm. $8 million of scope crossed the line, and literally not one item was ever big enough to trigger a real conversation. That right there, that's creeping scope.
It's basically like a hole full of pinholes. Not one of those leaks is going to sink you on its own, right? And frankly, each one is individually way easier to just ignore than to actually patch. But the reality is, nobody in this business ever sank from one giant hole in the side of their project. No way. They sink from 300 small ones in a bilge pump that simply couldn't keep up.
So here's our defense playbook for today. First, the invisible $8 million. Second, clarification versus change. Third, blocking the back door. Fourth, delay equals pay. Fifth, the zero-cost change order. And finally, number 6, the register is discipline.
Section 1. Clarification versus change, drawing the hard line.
So we absolutely have to draw a hard line here, and there's a stark black and white distinction between these two documents. A technical query, or TQ, strictly asks a question about existing scope. It's asking, what did you mean by this note? Or which standard applies here? It just clarifies. A change order, on the other hand, alters what we actually deliver, and it carries cost and time implications with it. So we're talking about two documents with two completely different commercial consequences.
Section 2. Blocking the back door. When questions become instructions.
Which brings us to a super critical definition. Listen, a TQ is not a backdoor for extra work. Your engineers absolutely must be trained to spot the exact moment a query stops being a simple question and transforms into an instruction. Because the moment it instructs, it is a change. And that's regardless of what the form at the top of the page actually says. Take a look at this quote right here. Let's say a query comes back from the client clarifying some detail, but then they casually tag on at the end, and please also include the additional platform. That is a massive red flag. It's the absolute perfect example of an abuse that must be ruthlessly blocked by your team right then and there.
So, the crucial takeaway here is this. A TQ is never ever a backdoor for extra work. The second a technical query instructs you to do something new, bam, it's a change. Period. Defending this boundary is step 1 in protecting your project's margin.
Section 3. Delay equals pay, the physical boundary. Now let's shift gears and see how this physical boundary plays out. The contract price assumes continuous access, right? So say it's the morning of day 1. Owner-provided equipment arrives late, or maybe the site gate just stays shut. By midday, your compensation clock starts ticking under the delay equals pay principle. But here's the kicker. By that evening, a contemporaneous log entry absolutely must be written and timestamped.
Because here is the catch. Your entitlement to compensation relies entirely on this specific contemporaneous record. If you wait 6 months to flag a delay, well, that's just a plausible grievance. If you log it the exact day it happens, noting the dates, recording the exact durations, and explicitly naming the affected activities, then, and only then, does it become a provable claim.
Section 4. The zero-cost change order. Testing the discipline.
Okay, I want you to put yourself in this room. High tension, you're in a meeting, and your client asks you for a quote-unquote minor P&ID change verbally. It seems totally harmless, right? Just a quick little tweak. So, what do you do?
Well, here is the counterintuitive tactic that separates good project managers from great ones. You log it in the register, you price the impact, and you issue a change order, even if you ultimately end up pricing it at zero. Why on earth would you do that? Because a zero-price change order does two vital things a verbal agreement never will. It creates a permanent record, and it teaches everyone in that room that your changes go through a strict, non-negotiable process.
Section 5. The register is discipline, the ultimate takeaway.
Let's quickly recap our defense playbook. We've gone over a lot, but you leave this explainer equipped to police the TQ versus CO boundary, aggressively block those instructing TQs, maintain flawless, contemporaneous delay records, and boldly log verbal changes, even the zero-cost ones. These are the actionable tools that actually stop the boat from sinking.
And that brings us to the core thesis of this whole explainer. The register is the discipline, not the money. The very moment you deliver unpriced extras just to be friendly, you've accidentally taught the client that your boundaries are negotiable.
By mastering these tools, you can now confidently execute and commercially defend a project. Which means, for our next stage, we can zoom out a bit and ask a much bigger question. Should this project even exist in this form at all? So, next time, we're going to be diving into concept selection and field economics.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a somewhat provocative thought. Really think about your current project for a second. If you can't find the discipline to enforce the boundary on a simple, zero-cost change today, how in the world will you ever defend a $1 million claim tomorrow? Contractual rights you don't exercise are rights you just gradually lose. So keep those boundaries sharp.